God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable in your sight, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Moses shared a very deep communion with God. Exodus 33:11 says that they talked to one another like close friends. They spoke to each other face to face. Moses saw the Lord's glory, and our first reading this morning reports that divine glory of God showed up on the face of Moses. So Moses walked around apparently wearing a veil. He did that to hide the bright, shiny skin that he received in the presence of God. And he hid that because, quite frankly, it seems like it freaked people out. The Israelites were frightened by God's radiance shining on the countenance of Moses. And that's true, right? Sometimes we are afraid of getting a little too close to the holy presence. What effect might it have on us? Moses hid his face because the Israelites were afraid. But some, like 1,300 years later, the disciple Simon Peter had a slightly different reaction to the radiant glory of God. The Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke all tell us about the transfiguration of Jesus. The story goes that Jesus asked his disciples who they thought he was. And Simon Peter confessed, "You are the Christ of God." And then Luke tells us, 8 days later, Jesus took Peter and James and John to the top of a mountain where they saw him transfigured right before their eyes. While Jesus was praying, while he was in communion with God, the appearance of his face was somehow changed, and his clothes became very bright. Luke says they looked like a flash of lightning. The glory of God was shining upon him. And Moses and Elijah, these two great patriarchs from Israel's history, they were suddenly there standing with Jesus, and all of them were circumferenced in the Lord's glorious splendor. When Peter saw that glory, when he saw the holy presence there with them on the mountaintop, he wanted to build 3 shelters, one for Jesus, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Now, of course, I have no idea what Peter envisioned when he suggested they build those shelters. But I always think about them as something like a shrine. A shrine. And dictionary.com says, in fact, that a shrine is a shelter that's used to enclose the remains or the relics of a holy person. And these shrines become objects of religious veneration, and people visit them on pilgrimage. According to Luke's telling of the story, unlike those ancient Israelites who were frightened by the radiance of God on the face of Moses, Peter's immediate reaction wasn't to fear God's glory when he saw it. He just wanted to encapsulate it. He wanted to build a shelter, a shrine, if you will, for Moses, for this great leader of Israel, who led his people out of slavery in Egypt and then gave them their law. And he wanted to build a shrine for Elijah. We studied Elijah for about 3 months last summer, right? We know him as this powerful prophet who called the people of Israel to a righteous relationship with God. And Peter also wanted to build this shelter, this shrine for Jesus, who just 8 days earlier, Peter confessed was the Christ of God. So 3 shrines for 3 holy people where religious folks could gather and worship God and see the glory of God. It's not really a horrible idea, you know. Christendom has been doing that for centuries. We build shrines. We build places to memorialize our patriarchs and our monarchs in the faith. Places of holy account, places where people make pilgrimage once a week, or once a year, or once in a lifetime. Places where we gather to worship. We've built shelters and shrines and grottos and chapels and cathedrals. We've constructed beautiful church buildings of all shapes and sizes where people can come to see the glory of God, right? The problem with putting up these holy shelters is that sometimes they take on a life of their own. If we aren't careful, all of our effort and all of our attention go towards the grandeur of our shrine. Will it include a basketball court? Will we have a breakfast area? Will we serve coffee with our literature? Of course, we want to be good stewards of our places of worship. And that means occasionally we have to replace carpet when it starts to look a little bit shoddy. Sometimes we have to work on the steeple when it starts to leak all over the choir lawn. But if our focus, if our priority is on this structure as a means of bringing people into the glory of God, maybe we've missed the point. Maybe Peter missed the point. He said, let's put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah. Let's erect 3 places to hold you, places where we can come and visit, places where we can come to see the glory of God. But while Peter was still speaking, this cloud appeared, and that cloud enveloped all of them. The cloud of holy presence embraced the whole group. God's glory embraced Jesus and Moses and Elijah, and it embraced James and John and even Peter. Even Peter. St. Irenaeus once said, the glory of God is a human being fully alive. The glory of God is a human being fully alive. I like that. I like it a lot. See, it's not in the shelters and the shrines and the sanctuaries we build that God's radiance is most visible. The holy presence is best revealed in humanity. That's what we learn in the incarnation of Christ. It is best revealed when we live our lives in communion with God, as we seek to be all that we're created to be, as we learn to live fully alive, holding one another in the same love with which we ourselves are being held. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3, beginning in the 16th verse, that's 2 Corinthians 3, beginning in the 16th verse, we hear the Apostle Paul say that when we seek the face of God, we recognize God's living presence is already with us. It's our face that shines with the glory of God, and we are transfigured like Jesus. Eugene Peterson says it this way in the Message. He says, our lives gradually become brighter and more beautiful as God enters them, and we become like God. The glory of God is a human being fully alive. At the Eucharist table, we experience the glory of God through Christ our Lord. As we come to the table unafraid, seeking God's face in the bread and in the cup of Jesus, we find the living holy presence is already here with us, shining upon us. And by this grace, we become God's glory. Not glory to hold and to shelter, but divine glory offered to the world around us. That's why the United Methodist Church celebrates open communion. This isn't a table for us to enshrine. This is the radiance of God offered to all people in equal measure. So I invite you this morning to come and receive. Come to commune with our Lord. Come now and know within you the glory of God. Amen and amen. Will you join with me now in the service of Word and Table?